client, guys, won't listen even if I scream from the top of, at the top of my power, right? I am Rajesh, they will not listen until I show them the passport, right? So the trust is again coming from a document being produced by some central authority. Any transaction we do, the trust is coming from a central body somewhere. What blockchain is doing is disintermediating this whole thing. It is enabling you and I, right, to transact directly without needing an intermediary. That is the core concept. And that's what you see here as well, right? If all things can be peer-to-peer, we don't have any disintermediary, we can exchange goods, right, without needing that central certification of any kind. Right? You can imagine how much difference it will make to life, right? I don't need a licensing authority out there, right? I don't need a passport authority, I don't need a bank, right? I can send money to you directly. Please don't raise your hopes up. I'm not like that. But the money can be exchanged and it can be used across boundaries, right? It is not controlled by, and nobody's managing that money. Whether it is digital money, for example. So and that is why there are lots of issues out there. Various governments are sort of putting different kinds of constraints. And there is a lot of speculation going on in one way or the other. So for all practical purposes, right, what blockchain does, it helps to achieve trust and integrity for all transactions in the worst of all conditions. And we'll go into the details of this. What do we mean by worst of all conditions? In a way, it's right here. Internet. Obviously, out of 7 billion people on the planet, I would say around 4.5 people have access to internet in one form or the other. All right. And all those people who are on the blockchain system, out of 4.5 billion people, I would say at this point in time, maybe 100 million have, or maybe not even 100 million, maybe 10 million would be connected to blockchain in one way or the other. Maybe number might be lower. It may grow. And all of them, right, are there on blockchain. I still want to have a transaction. I don't know how many peers are there on blockchain at any point in time. I don't know their reliability, but I still should be able to transact with any of them without really bothering what is the intention, track record, or any other detail about them. Right? The system has to take care of integrity of that transaction. So we'll talk about how blockchain enables that. Okay, this is quickly for those of you who have a little more interest on the technical side of it. Different people define blockchain in different ways. Data structure where there's a lot of data stored and which cannot be changed. All right. At this point in time, most of the databases that are out there used by all of us, somebody can go in the back end, right, and make the changes. We see that happen in our companies all the time, right? In case if we need to change our password, in case if we need to go back and correct something, right? There is somebody out there who knows the whole database world, can go and physically change. That cannot happen in the blockchain world, right? So once the data has been stored, it is immutable. That's why sometimes it is referred to as a data structure. It's an algorithm, all right? A sequence of instructions which essentially manages the integrity of the data out there. I'll talk about why it is called blockchain and what is this stuff called blocks. It's a suite of technologies, and that is where I would say the brilliance comes into play. Sorry, go ahead.
Just a quick question about transactions. So, are there no mistaken transactions? What if a transaction has some sort of error?
All right.
You meant to pay $1,000, you paid $1,001.
Sure. So, if you make that mistake, there is a heavy cost to correct that mistake. Right? And it can be done, but then you have to convince a lot of other people that yes, the mistake has been genuine. and there is a heavy cost to that mistake. So park that thought, because it's a very important one. The whole question is a very relevant one and an important one. As we go into the details of how the integrity of data is maintained, right? The answer to your question will lie there, right? Yeah, it's a suite of technologies. So I was talking about the fact that, yeah, the brilliance of this person, right, Satoshi, lies in how he or she took the collection of existing technologies and weaved them together, right? Effectively calling it blockchain. Okay. Please hold your questions on this one. Very soon we'll be able to appreciate this. And effectively leading to a purely distributed peer-to-peer system of ledgers. Okay, we don't need any central authority to maintain that ledger. Okay, if you're talking about a peer-to-peer system, your pen. Okay, if you're talking about a peer-to-peer system, and we have to have this peer-to-peer transaction, what are the things that are supposed to happen? First, he has to describe, right, in the software world, right, he has to describe the concept of ownership, or rather not he, the system has to describe the concept of ownership. Right? Ownership can happen in one of the following two ways. So please imagine, right now I can say this bottle belongs to me. Right. But how do you show it in the software world that yes, this bottle does, or this item does belong to me? Okay. There are two ways to do that. One, right, there can be a direct relationship between the object and the owner. Okay. It is very similar to what you can do in the bank, right? You go in the bank, you can say my account holds $1,000 and that's the status. The second way to do it is you have a series of transactions that are leading to the current status of ownership. So if we're talking about this pen, right, coming to him, the best way for, right, us to define that ownership is if I can have the series of transactions from the time this pen was manufactured to the time it got to him, right? Instead of he saying this pen belongs to me, right? And I might still have questions, right? How does it got to him, correct? If I have all those transactions starting from the manufacturer to the distributor, to the wholesaler, to the retailer, and to him, right? And all the invoices are put together, and if the system ensures that all those transactions, the integrity of all those transactions are maintained, there is no way I would doubt that yes, the pen does belong to him, right? So if that is what, so that transaction, capturing transaction is the way ownership has been described or has been planned in the entire blockchain system. From the origin of the product or the service or the goods or whatever it is, to the time, right, it has landed up in his plate, right? So that's the way ownership can be described.
The question? So what happens to the very first block? Who creates that?
So at the time, right there, right, you have to introduce it in the system.
And who does that?
Okay, so that is the manufacturer. Okay, so there is the manufacturer, that provision has been maintained. So when I talked about algorithm, right, at the end of the day, there are different blockchains out there. You know, this is an important concept. Thanks for asking that question. There is not one blockchain out there, right? There are different, there is one for, I think, Bitcoin network, right? And likewise, there are multiple others that are out there. Each of these blockchain networks are guided, right, by a consortium, by an individual or whatever, right? And they lay out their ground rules. So it's not as if it is, there is no central authority at all, because at the end of the day, somebody has to lay out the rules which will govern. And the rules are largely in line with the concepts that were there in the original paper, right? So they lay out the rules in terms of how the original, say for example, if, so I'm sure you all would have heard Walmart is using blockchain technology for groceries and so on and so forth, right? So they probably have provision where the original producer or the original manufacturer, right, they can introduce the initial step, and from there the transactions start rolling. Okay, and they create the first block. So the first block has to be created by the manufacturer at that point in time. Yeah, so somewhere it has to start, and those rules are laid out by these consortiums, right, which are which enable these blockchains.
Question. Let us say that pen Madhav gives as a gift to Lata.
Sure.
So she has now the ownership, but that transaction is not in the system.
Right.
So how would that part, then there is a missing link there in that
Yeah,
transaction?
so she does not, as far as the system is concerned, she does not own it. The transaction has to happen even if it is zero price or as a gift, right? Whatever. The transaction doesn't mean that money has to exchange hands or something like that, right?
Yeah, basically I want to find out that that link is missing in this particular transaction and she is now the owner.
So it's in their hands. They can literally create a transaction that he gifted to her at zero price.
Okay, so
Something
they
like
have
that.
that entry there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, coming back to the concept of describing ownership, right? As these transactions are happening, right, from one person to another and so on and so forth, just imagine additional complexities that are going on here, right? If like you are giving it to her, first you have to identify yourself, right, on the system. Then, then you have to prove that yes, you are the owner today. Then she has to identify, right, if the pen has to come to her, yes, who is she, right, whether, and then when the transaction is happening, it does have your authorization. So if you look at that simple fact of simple transaction, there are too many things that are going on here, okay. If you just give you a little more flavor, the concept of ownership, right? If you look at the number of things that have to be taken care of, an identifier of the account that is to hand off ownership, an identifier of the account that is to receive ownership, amount of goods to be transferred, time of transaction, fees to be paid, proof that the owner of the account agrees with the transfer, integrity of the transaction history, formal correctness, semantic correctness, right? A pen cannot be sold as 3 liters of pen, right, or 2 gallons of pen, right? So those are these elements, right, which also have to be looked into. Okay. Then ensuring that account does not hand off more than what it does, what it has. Right? He cannot sell the same pen twice. Right? It's a digital good at the end of the day. Right? We have seen, right, like for example, the songs, right, .mp3 songs or whatever. Right? I can send those songs to all of you independently also. Right? That one good, I may have bought the license from Sony Music or whatever, right, for one song, and probably I had the permission in the contract or whatever that I could sell it once, but I could even sell it to 50 of you, right? So the blockchain system has to ensure that that is not permissible. If I have one digital good, right, I can only sell it once, which is also there on preventing others. Okay, and all of this with no central authority. All this has to happen that way. Okay?
This is peer-to-peer transaction. Now, who is the central body that does the checks and balances?
Nobody. The rules are there, but the algorithm that is part of blockchain, right, takes care of this. So we'll come to that. Just hold some of your thoughts. Give me about 10 minutes and we'll get to that. Please go ahead.
It seems to me that what we're looking at here, you need an authentic owner, you need an authentic recipient,
Correct.
and you also need an authentic entity which has the title bound to it, listing the owner. And you need the entity that's owned and the owner together in order to establish title. Is that right?
When you say entity, are you talking about this pen being the entity?
The pen's the entity.
Yes, you said it. All this in the digital world.
So there has to be a factory that generates the representatives, the symbolic representations of the owners and the entity that's being transferred.
Correct.
And you have to have some kind of certification that the factory is real and not a forger.
That is correct. So from first block onwards, right, the system is foolproof. The first block, right, where the entries made into the blockchain system is where, I think, going back to his question, authentication has to be enabled, right? The source has to, so at the end of the day, right?
So everything goes back to the source.
So if we are saying it's a champagne, right? How, and then if, it doesn't matter how it gets to a liquor store here, the champagne, the only, I would say, manufacturer who are allowed to use the word champagne, right, are the ones who are based in the village of Champagne in France.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So if there is an address of that location, right, and there is a firm out there, it starts with that. I think we have to take that as the starting point.
Okay.
Right. The first person who is probably doing the transaction has to go with that belief. Because at the end of the day, somewhere, right, the source has to come into play.
Okay.
Okay? So if I'm buying a diamond, right, and I don't want to buy a diamond which has originated in Sierra Leone, right, because of child labor or whatever. Okay. So yeah, I can take it to the source. That, hey, where is it being originated, where has this diamond originated
So you
from?
can do the whole supply chain, and that's why they talk about using it to authenticate pharmaceuticals, for instance.
That is correct. That's correct. So you're already seeing some applications of blockchain here. Even though we have not gone into the technological aspects yet, what we will be doing shortly, but what you're talking, yes, that's what happens. That's why I think in jewelry, in pharmaceutical goods, in other say, areas like groceries, already blockchain is being applied. Please go ahead.
There's a lot of data being generated here, and obviously there must be multiple copies of it for it to be reliable.
Yes.
Who is supplying the physical storage sites for that data, and how are they invested in this process?
Nobody is supplying. So hold your question, we'll answer that. Okay?
I'm sure you may get this. Isn't there some type of competition as to who defines a blockchain for groceries? Who defines a blockchain for diamonds? Who defines a blockchain for like work and say, here's my blockchain, and you're going to use this for my stuff. And then J&J's going to talk, no, mine. So there's no consistency, right? And then there's some consortium that says, okay, let's sort of define a
Sure.
like HTTP, whatever else. You come up with a consortium that defines what it should be.
The
That's
majority of the people who agree to something, that's what it wins.
Yes, I think in your question lies the answer, partially he touched upon it. The fact of the matter is, people who are in the jewelry business, right, unless all the people who have to transact get onto the jewelry specific blockchain, right, if they want to have one, they can also use even Bitcoin for that matter, right, but otherwise, they have to agree that yes, we will be using this blockchain for all our transactions. The guiding principles are not compromised, right? If it, that's the fact of the matter. That consortium that is floating that blockchain has to lay out the ground rules, saying that hey, we are sticking to the principles that have been laid out in this manner, or whatever it is, or we are making this change. But they all have to agree that yes, we'll be using this blockchain for all our transactions. Because at the end of the day, blockchain is all said and done. I cannot have a transaction with him if both of us are not on the same blockchain network. Right? It's very similar to if I'm not connected to the internet, I still have my computer, but I can't write an email, I can't do anything on World Wide Web. Similarly, you get onto blockchain network, which is for your specific purpose, and Walmart probably would be dictating to its suppliers, guys, we are going to be using this blockchain, right, for this purpose, and we mandate that if you want to do business with us, get on.
So in fact, Walmart would create their blockchain, but then Target would come along, or ShopRite would say, no, I want my blockchain. And then you have all these smaller companies saying, well, which blockchain do I need to use because I got to ship mine?
Oh. So eventually, right, sorry,
And then that's cost to the company.
that is true. So eventually it will, we are in the early days, different formats will evolve and things will settle down, right, at the end of the day. And Walmart may not say that, hey, I use my blockchain. In fact, it is in their best interest to have an industry blockchain for that purpose, right? So that all this transaction can happen a lot more seamlessly. They are part of an industry ecosystem. Because if there are only limited players in a blockchain system, the possibility that blockchain will get compromised is high. The beauty of the blockchain is only when there are lots of people who are on the system, then it is extremely difficult to, I would say, play around with the system. And we'll talk about what it means. Can I make a request here? Give me 15 minutes. I'll quickly cover some concepts, right, and we'll come back to it.